Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take a whole stack of information and pull out the really important bits for you.
That's right.
Today, we're diving into quite a collection of sources. There's even an audio file in there, Russian alert, NIBIRU, Planet X, space event imminent. Bit of a title.
Sounds intriguing.
Our job here is to unpack all these claims, these observations, and well, a lot of them seem to point towards this really surprising convergence of events and preparations too, particularly around late 2013.
Yeah, that period seems key in these sources.
Get ready, you might see some connections you weren't quite expecting. Okay, so let's jump in. The sources, they kick right off with a pretty striking claim, this idea that Homeland Security, DHS, is basically building a domestic military.
That's a strong way to put it.
Well, the source actually says Homeland Security would kick their butts in a week compared to the regular military.
Wow, okay.
And they say this buildup is happening because it's unlawful or unconstitutional to use American troops on American soil. That's the reasoning given.
So, bypassing restrictions by using DHS. That's the implication.
Seems like it. And they give this really vivid example. A SWAT officer friend of the person in the source who apparently trained Iraqi police.
Okay.
This officer was supposedly seen on TV, during the Boston Marathon bombing aftermath in Watertown, Massachusetts.
Right.
And he was wearing the exact same combat gear as he wore in Iraq. Only difference, it was blue.
Blue gear, like police issue, but combat style.
Exactly. And the source says they saw similar blue gear helmets, flat jackets, weapons on state police, Boston police during that same event. So the claim is that DHS is pre-staging gear equipment consistently, trying to use like standardized vehicles, standardized equipment.
Standardizing across different forces under a DHS umbrella, maybe?
Could be. And the reason given in the source that the government is afraid of its own citizens, and also that it's shrinking the military at the same time.
That's quite the accusation. Fear of the populace driving militarization of domestic forces.
Yeah, and the source questions if you even need this many vehicles and this many troops. They point out the last time more than 10 terrorists were in the same place at one time was September 11th, and all these vehicles in the world wouldn't have prevented it.
Well, what's fascinating here, I think, is this perspective on the shifting roles, right?
Yeah.
The capabilities of domestic law enforcement.
Yeah.
The source clearly interprets it as direct militarization.
Yeah.
And it definitely raises that important question about, where is the line between public safety and, well, military-style operations inside the country?
And it doesn't stop there. The sources, they also talk about potential government intrusion, like right into your home.
Oh, how so?
They mention a brand new federal program tied to Obamacare, apparently, and it supposedly spends $224 million taxpayer dollars to send government home inspectors to your house.
Home inspectors. For what? Health reasons.
It's not entirely clear from the snippet, but it's presented as a greater opportunity for an intrusion directly into your home, making you subject to a random unannounced inspection by the Obamacare people. That's the quote.
Random unannounced inspections. Yeah, I can see how that would raise red flags for people worried about government overreach.
Definitely. And, okay, here's where it gets really interesting on the DHS front. The sources dig into this controversy around a specific DHS security manager.
A manager? What about them?
This person was apparently in charge of buying weapons and ammunition for the federal government.
Okay, important job.
But allegedly, this same person was moonlighting online as a, quote, hate-spewing anti-white activist.
Wait, seriously? Buying government weapons by day,
Right.
and that online?
That's the claim. According to their website, the source quotes them saying, in order for black people to survive, a lot of whites need to be killed.
Whoa, okay. That's extreme.
Yeah. The source is understandably pretty outraged, asking, why is a guy like this still working for the federal government?
Well, yeah, you can see why they'd ask that. Now, if we connect that to the bigger picture the source is painting, they also claim this is the same agency, DHS, that was apparently issuing warnings to local law enforcement, warnings about domestic terrorism threats from Catholics, Christians, and returning Army veterans.
Wait, so warnings about veterans and religious groups, but employing someone who allegedly says that online?
Exactly. According to the source, it presents this, well, jarring contradiction. Who's considered a threat versus who gets hired to protect the homeland.
That is quite a picture the sources are painting there, a very critical one.
It certainly raises questions about consistency, doesn't it? At least from the perspective laid out in these materials.
Okay, so moving beyond purely domestic stuff, the sources also flagged this unusual international agreement.
International with who?
With Russia, actually. On June 25th, 2013, in D.C., the Russian Emergency Situations Ministry, which the source describes as Russia's equivalent to FEMA, signed an agreement with our FEMA.
Okay. FEMA to FEMA agreements for disaster response aren't totally unheard of, are they? International cooperation and all that.
True. And the Russian ministry's website apparently said it was to exchange experts during joint rescue operations and major disasters. Sounds reasonable enough on the surface.
Right. Sharing best practices, maybe technical expertise.
But the source then discusses what it calls much more sinister aspects, also supposedly described on the Russian site.
Like what?
Things like Russian experts being involved in monitoring and forecasting emergency situations, training of rescuers, development of mine rescuing, and this is the key part, provision of security at mass events.
Provision of security at mass events. Okay, so that phrase does sound a bit different from just disaster rescue exchange.
Yeah, that's what the source latches on to.
What's fascinating is how the source interprets that specific phrase. They worry it could mean Russian so-called security forces, or even, quote, Russian soldiers on American soil confiscating guns from American citizens if they were brought in doing some kind of disaster scenario.
Wow. Okay, so linking disaster aid cooperation with potential foreign troops on U.S. soil involved in security or enforcement.
Exactly. It highlights this really deep-seated concern about national sovereignty and potential foreign interference, even under the guise of help.
And this immediately makes the source think of the Boston Marathon attack aftermath again, as a kind of precedent.
How so?
Well, the source reminds us that de facto martial law was declared in the Watertown and surrounding areas while they were looking for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who they call the unarmed teenager.
Right, the lockdown, the house-to-house searches, that was controversial.
Really? The source says hundreds of militarized police conducted illegal house-to-house searches and people were taken into custody without being charged.
Okay.
So the source then asks this crucial question. If a similar martial law situation happened again, de facto or declared, would these Russian soldiers under this agreement be there alongside the militarized U.S. police?
Ah, I see the connection they're making.
Yeah, and they take it further. Would there come a time when the Russian soldiers were actually the ones in charge during the martial law?
That's a significant escalation of the concern.
And it's worth noting, the source explicitly blames these worries on our own government, the rogue administration of Barack Hussein Obama.
Okay, so it's crucial for us, and for you listening, to remember that's the source's specific language and characterization. Very critical, very pointed view of that administration.
Absolutely. We're reporting what the source claims here. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From, human actions and agreements to a different kind of threat the sources focus on, an EMP. Electromagnetic pulse.
Ah, yes, the EMP threat. That comes up a lot in preparedness circles.
Right. The documents highlight that an EMP can be devastating to the grid. And crucially, they say it's not something that has to be or necessarily will be likely to be carried out by an adversary.
Meaning natural causes.
Exactly. That says an EMP can be carried out by the sun, a massive solar flare, for instance.
The Carrington event scenario.
Precisely. And they warn that a very substantial share of the U.S. grid could go down from an EMP.
And the source's assessment of U.S. preparedness.
Not good. They claim the U.S. is behind on the combative side of EMP, meaning defense against it, and also behind the Russians.
Okay, so perceived vulnerability there. Does the source offer any evidence for this concern around that time?
It does. This leads to another detail they point out in a New York Times headline. It apparently read, as worries over the power grid rise, a drill will simulate a knockout blow.
A drill, simulating a grid collapse.
Yeah. The drill was called Grid X2, described as an EMP simulation and an entire North American-wide exercise.
North American-wide, so U.S. and Canada, maybe Mexico too, that's big.
Huge! And here's the kicker, according to the sources. The final planning phase is October 1st.
October 1st, again, that date.
It keeps coming up, doesn't it? And maybe even more curiously, the sources point to a related operational change also involving space surveillance.
What kind of change?
Well, supposedly due to resource constraints caused by sequestration, the budget cuts.
Right. Sequestration was a big deal then.
Air Force Space Command officials reportedly told the 21st Space Wing to prepare to discontinue operations at the Air Force Space Surveillance System, AFSSS.
Discontinue. Shut down the space fence system.
That's what it sounds like. The source says discontinuing means it would not be maintained in operational status. And the deadline for preparing this shutdown?
Let me guess. October 1st.
October 1st, supposedly saving about $14 million a year, but shutting down a major space surveillance asset right when you're drilling for an EMP grid knockout and worried about solar flares. It seems odd, doesn't it?
It certainly adds to the pattern the sources are highlighting around that specific date, shutting down eyes on the sky while drilling for a major grid failure.
So yeah, if you've been following along, you've definitely noticed that date, October 1st, 2013.
Or dates very close to it.
Exactly. And this is where the sources just unleash this, almost overwhelming list of preparations, events, deadlines, all clustering around October 1st or the weeks just before or after.
It really does feel like the sources are presenting evidence of some kind of coordinated, large-scale readiness effort.
Let's try and break it down. What kind of things are we talking about?
Well, it's quite a list they provide. It seems to fall into a few categories. First, there's a huge focus on emergency supplies, particularly for FEMA.
Okay, like what?
The sources mention a possible emergency alert for FEMA Region 3, that's the D.C. Mid-Atlantic area, received from a retired South Dakota State Senator, Sheldon Songstad.
An alert? Interesting.
And then concrete purchase orders. FEMA buys over $14.2 million worth of MREs and heater meals. Delivery target. FEMA Region 3, by October 1st.
$14 million of food.
Plus 2 million pouches of emergency water. Same region, same deadline. October 1st.
Wow.
And not just Region 3. Another $13.6 million order for MREs and heater meals, this time for delivery to Austin, also by October 1st.
Okay, so massive FEMA stockpiling, specifically targeted for October 1st delivery. What else?
Then there's a significant focus on, let's call it military and security readiness, both domestic and, interestingly, international personnel on U.S. soil.
Go on.
A 9-week training course for UN peacekeepers. Location is mentioned as CONUS, presumably somewhere in the U.S.
UN troops training in the U.S.?
Learning urban warfare, English, and U.S. weapon systems. According to the source, this was for 386,000 troops. And the completion date, October 1st.
386,000, that's a very large number. Urban warfare training in the U.S. ending October 1st.
It's a striking claim. Then for U.S. personnel, no leave allowed from September 28th through November 5th.
Blocking leave for over a month.
Right. NORCM's yearly civil unrest training, supposedly suspended until September 27th, then shifted to be performed specifically in northeast coastal areas.
Northeast coast, interesting.
And all DHS agents mandated to qualify with sidearm, shotgun, and AR-15 by September 28th. The source notes there was no mention of the usual yearly, less lethal qualification, just firearms.
Focusing on lethal force qualification right before this period. Okay, so provisions, military training, security readiness. What about infrastructure or public health angles?
Yep, covered too. The CDC ordered $11 million worth of antibiotics, delivery destination, FEMA Region 3, deadline, October 1st.
Antibiotics too. What else?
The World Health Organization, the WHO, reportedly held only its second emergency meeting in its entire history. The topic, the MERS coronavirus. The determination, a vaccine needed to be in place by October 1st.
WHO emergency meeting, MERS vaccine deadline, October 1st. It's relentless.
And then there's the mention of 2800 MAPS. It's not specified what MAPS stands for, needing delivery to DHS by October 1st.
Okay. And any broader government system tests or mandates happening?
Absolutely. Quite a few things lining up. The release date for the QE3 report, Quantitative Easing 3, was apparently moved to October 16th, just after that initial window.
Okay.
GPS and communication satellites. Sporadic testing was coordinated for the first time ever, apparently. Test date, September 29th.
Testing critical comms right before October 1st.
Then PUTUS mandates, presidential mandates, to FEMA and DHS about supporting cities dealing with extreme climate change. These mandates, issued in the prior 3 weeks, had to be completed by October 1st.
Climate change preparedness deadline, October 1st.
Even schools. Over 300 school systems across the U.S. had apparently sorted out 3-day emergency kits for the school and for each student. All deliveries scheduled during September, ready before October.
Wow, down to the school level.
All National Guard units were told to complete riot control and disaster assistance training during their annual 2-week training that year. All units had to finish that training by September 30th.
Guard trained up on riot control and disasters right before October 1st.
And the emergency broadcast system. Daily testing was set to start September 25th and run through October 2nd, right over that key date.
Daily EBS tests. That's unusual, isn't it?
It seems more frequent than normal testing protocols. And finally, even the Coast Guard. Eastern-based units were set to do massive group training, usually done down in the Gulf, but this time off Virginia and Delaware. a 10-day mission starting September 26th.
So, Coast Guard shifting major training to the Mid-Atlantic starting just before October 1st.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what does this all mean when you lay it out like that? The sheer volume, the specificity, the convergence on that one date from so many different angles, FEMA, military, DHS, health, communications, schools, finance.
It's undeniably striking, isn't it? The sources present this as, well, almost irrefutable evidence of a massive, coordinated national-level preparation effort.
Preparation for what, though? That's the question the sources seem to leave hanging.
Precisely. A preparedness effort for some kind of major event, anticipated or perhaps unknown, timed for the start of the fiscal year, October 1st, 2013. It really does feel like a countdown presented in these documents.
Okay, so beyond all that governmental and military prep, the sources also point to some strange environmental things happening around the same time, and celestial stuff, too.
Right, not just human activity. Nature seemed off, according to these sources.
Yeah, like starting in June of that year, 2013, an unusually high number of dead bottlenose dolphins started washing up on beaches, from New Jersey down to Virginia.
Dead dolphins. How many?
The source says in 1 month alone, at least 28 dead dolphins washed ashore. And Virginia was seeing the worst of it. Their July numbers were apparently 7 times higher than usual.
7 times? That's significant. Did they know why?
No. The source explicitly states that experts don't know exactly what's causing it yet. It was overwhelming the rescue staff.
Unusual animal deaths coinciding with all this other activity.
Yeah, it raises that question, doesn't it? Is it just a weird, sad coincidence? Or, as the source might imply, is it somehow connected, part of a bigger pattern you're supposed to notice?
It certainly adds another layer of anomaly to the period, at least for you, the listener, to consider alongside the other claims.
And then finally, the sources look up to the sky.
Celestial event.
Yeah. It mentions a big and brilliant comet arriving in November 2013, Comet Ison, presumably, with the potential, they said, to be 15 times brighter than the moon and visible in broad daylight.
Ah, yes, Ison. There was a lot of hype about that potentially being the comet of the century. It ultimately fizzled out, but the anticipation was high around that time.
Right. And the sources also bring up the Chelyabinsk meteor event in Russia from the previous winter. You know, the one that exploded like a meteor the size of a house.
Caused quite a panic, damaged buildings, injured people from the shockwave.
Yeah. And scientists reportedly suggested that rock might not have been flying solo, but maybe part of a group of asteroids that could still pose a threat.
So hinting at ongoing potential impact threats around the same time as this comet's arrival.
Exactly. And the source kind of wraps up this section with just this feeling, something's just not right.
A general sense of unease.
Yeah. And it also vaguely references a cloud and a real image of what's inside that cloud, mentioning a cover-up. But honestly, there's no more detail given on what that cloud or image is supposed to be. It's very cryptic.
Just adding to the overall mystery the source seems to be building.
So as we pull out of this deep dive now, wow, we've unpacked quite a collection of claims and observations from these sources, haven't we?
We certainly have. It's a dense tapestry.
From, the perceived militarization of police here at home, the worries about government intrusion.
Then that strange agreement with Russia's FEMA equivalent.
The concerns about the power grid, the EMP threat, both natural and man-made.
And then that incredible pileup of preparedness deadlines, all pointing to October 1st, 2013. FEMA, military, health, comms, everything.
Plus the weird environmental stuff like the dolphins and the celestial events, the comet, the meteor echoes.
It definitely raises a big question, I think, for you listening. When you see such a convergence, such a remarkable collection of disparate events and preparations all lining up like this in the source material, are you looking at just a series of really odd, unrelated coincidences? Or, as the sources strongly suggest, is there some kind of larger underlying narrative connecting all these threads?
Right. So what does it all mean when you put it together in your head? How do these different threads, the alleged government overreach, the international agreements, the grid vulnerability, the October 1st focus, the environmental signs, how do they weave together for you?
And what actions, if any, does this kind of information suggest might be prudent, whether for individuals or for governments, when faced with these concentrated moments of apparent readiness and, well, unexplained phenomena?
It definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. Preparedness, perception, and how you navigate a world just saturated with information and sometimes some very worrying claims.